All right. Now what I'm going to begin doing on my slab just to prepare it for using to construct the wall of my mug, I'm going to take my smooth metal rib, and you'll notice pretty quickly after you unwrap your slab that the slab has a bit of a texture, and this is resulting from the canvas that it was sandwiched in between as it ran through the slab roller. So we want to get rid of that texture first of all, but another thing that's going to happen when we use our smooth metal rib to smooth over the surface is it's going to strengthen the slab or the surface of the slab itself. Okay, so when I ran it through the slab roller to achieve this nice consistent thickness in the slab, what ended up happening was all the little clay particles that make up this piece of clay began to stretch apart from one another, okay? So they were kind of stressed in the sense that they were pulling away from the other particles around them. But when we go to use our smooth metal rib to push and smooth the surface of that clay back together, all those little clay particles are now going to be pushed down, laying flat and sort of tucked in, locked together like puzzle pieces against one another, okay? So that's gonna help bond and strengthen the surface of our slab. So as I'm smoothing, what I'm making sure to do, I've got my thumb on one side of my smooth metal rib, my four fingers on the other side. And I'm not using the edge of the rib to scrape the surface, okay? That would mean that I'm actually taking clay off of my slab. I'm using my fingers to push down against the surface and kind of flatten the slab or flatten my rib against the slab so that it's smoothing out that surface, getting rid of that canvas texture and pulling those clay particles back together. Okay. So as I'm doing this, I don't know if you guys can see this very well on the video, but what I'm starting to notice is that the light is reflecting on my clay as it's getting smoothed out. And if I take my finger across it, it feels much less bumpy. It feels more like a smooth piece of plastic. Okay, so I'm gonna do that to one side, gently flip it over, being careful not to pinch into my clay to make small weak spots where my fingers pinch it thinner. And then flip over that slab and do the same thing to the other side. And I'm trying to start on the edge of my slab as opposed to starting somewhere in the middle, because once I go to put that pressure down, I end up pushing the edge of this tool into the clay, and that leaves a mark where I began it, okay? So I'm trying to start on the very edge and pull all the way across and around my slab so that I avoid making those little marks. Okay, so again, just feeling it. It's nice and smooth now on both sides. Okay. All right, my next step is to start by cutting a straight cut across the top of it, okay? So I rolled these slabs out for you guys so that they were more elongated one direction, but you still had enough space here to get a nice height for your mug that fits either somewhere, you know, on your soda can, the height of that, or one of your tin cans, okay? So we should have plenty of space for the height of our mug here. This is gonna be the direction, the width that wraps around the outside edge, okay? So it's gonna create the circumference of our mug, okay? So I'm gonna use my ruler just as a straight edge. You could also, this is the case where you can use maybe the edge of your sketchbook if need be. And I'm just gonna place it down and start by cutting, like I said, a straight line across the top of it. Don't want to cut too far down because then that will leave me without much height for my mug, but just a strip, you know, maybe an inch, inch and a half down from the tallest point, okay? And then I'll set that aside. So I've got this nice straight edge that goes pretty much from this point to this point. These areas I'll end up cutting off here in a minute, okay? Now I'm gonna use my can, and I'm just gonna line it, the top of it up with the top of my slab where I just made that cut, okay? And I am gonna use my fettling knife. You can use your pencil, you can use your needle tool, and I'm just gonna mark that height right there, okay? So you can see that little line that I made to measure the height of my can. I'm gonna move across and do the same thing on the other side. Line it up at the top, make a mark down at the bottom. Okay, so now I've got 2 points that I can use to connect my ruler or my straight edge. And I'm just going to make a cut right there. And then I could shift from side to side to finish that cut. Just line it up with that first cut, trim that side off, and then trim the other side. All right, so now you should have a nice long strip. To get a gauge of the width or the circumference of the can, I just made a little mark right here, or I could just use the point where the color on the label changes from white to sort of that tannish color. And I'm just gonna lay that down at one point here. This doesn't have to be an exact science. It just gives me an idea of how much of this strip of clay that I need. Okay, so I'm gonna match that up right there, and then I'm just gonna roll it along, okay, until that point touches down on my clay again, about here. Okay, so I know I need at least that much width to fit around the entire can. What I'm going to do is I'm gonna leave a little bit extra, because what I want enough clay, and you'll see this in a minute, I want enough clay to overlap when I fit it around my can so that I can make a nice clean cut and fit those two sides together. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave a little bit beyond those two marks that I made, okay? Do you guys have questions at this point as to how I measured and got to this point? Do you feel pretty comfortable with that? Yeah, Colin.
I'm assuming you just want to leave like a little bit on the top and bottom just for like safety's sake.
You mean like a little extra height in addition to the can?
Yeah, I mean like not much, but just a little.
So I cut mine pretty exact, so it really does match up with the very top and the very bottom of the can. Here, I'll kind of turn it so that you can see a little bit better. Okay. If you want to leave a little more height, you can, but just know that we're going to be wrapping this clay around this. This is going to be our form that clay is going to be kind of pressed up against. So just know if you leave a little bit of extra at the top, it might just get a little bit pressed over the edge of the can.
Okay.
But if you want to find something that's a little bit taller than this, you don't have to use a can. This is just what I thought was the best kind of shape and size for what we're making. You could certainly go with a soda can, or if you have like a tall cup in your kitchen that you want to use instead as a form, that would be fine too. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to just set this aside for a second. And I'm going to get my can. And you guys should have all gotten a piece of newsprint paper, much bigger than this piece I have right here. I just tore this off. It's about the width, the short measurement of my paper. So I just tore a strip off that I knew would be a little bit taller than the height of my can. So it's a little bit taller by almost 2 inches there. It doesn't have to be that tall, but just enough so that it rises above the can a little bit so you can easily grab it if you need to. I'm gonna use this newsprint to wrap around my can. And this is just gonna provide a barrier between the clay and the surface of the can so that when I do wrap that clay around, I don't have issues with it sticking to the surface and being hard to pull that can out. That paper provides that little barrier between the two, okay? And this is where the tape comes in handy. You just need a little piece to hold that paper on, okay? All right, so now that I've done that, I'm gonna bring my clay slab back. And I'm gonna stand the slab up. Oh, I'm sorry, hold on, let me backtrack a little bit. And I'm gonna switch my camera over so you guys can see this. Now, when you guys are drinking out of a cup or mug, you might not realize exactly what's happening. You just think, oh, well, I'm drinking out of it, no big deal. On most of your glasses or mugs or cups, whatever they're made of, plastic, glass, ceramic, whatever, the lip of those drinking vessels is usually relatively thin and rounded out, okay? So on this example here of this mug, you can see, I'll hold it up a little bit closer, you can see that that lip has been slightly rounded. So as opposed to that kind of fat, really angled, sort of sharp edge that we just created by cutting through the clay slab, this has really been taken care of, so that when you go to drink out of it, what's happening with your mouth is the corners of your mouth are allowed to close around that thin lip, okay? So when I put my mouth on it, you can see that the corner of my mouth remains closed and kind of creates a seal as I'm drinking, okay? If I were to leave the edge of my slab really, really thick, like what it is right now, what's gonna happen when I go to drink from that mug ultimately is my mouth is gonna have to be open wider, and therefore leaving that corner of my mouth open, which is just an invitation for my coffee or my hot cocoa to dribble out of my mouth onto my clothes, and you look like a real winner at that point, okay? So we're gonna avoid that altogether, and we're just gonna take some time to clean up that lip before we actually stand it upright and wrap it around our form here, okay? So I'm just gonna take my sponge, get a little bit of water on it, wring it out, okay? So I don't have a ton of water in here, I just have enough to wet it, and then that allows me to pull it across that lip. So this is gonna be the top edge of my mug, or the lip of my mug, okay? And I'm just adding gentle pressure, coming in with my finger, just to slightly round out that lip, okay? So I don't know if you guys can see that shift there. I'm gonna do that to the other side. So I'm gonna flip it over. Okay, and again, just round out that edge. Not using a lot of pressure, just enough to shift that from being a hard edge to now a more softened, thinner edge. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stand this upright, and I'm gonna wrap the clay around my form. Just trying to keep that nice and tight against the paper. And then right here, I know I've got this extra, I left that intentionally if you remember. I'm gonna overlap that clay as tightly as I can. Okay, so I've got this large overlapped part here, but what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna cut through so that those meet cleanly together. Okay, so the first reaction I might have when I go to cut through is to cut straight in so that my knife is perpendicular to my paper. Okay, if I turn that and show that to you, maybe you can see that a little bit better. So I want to avoid doing this because I don't want those clay slabs to match perfectly and butt up against each other like this. I actually want to turn my knife slightly at an angle and make a cut that goes more across like that. So when I slice through, I have two angles that slightly overlap, but I don't end up with a super thick bulge in the wall of my clay where they're overlapping. The thickness of the slab doubles up. Okay, so I'll show that here now. So again, just angling my knife and cutting straight down and through. Trying to keep that angle all the way down. Pull that piece off. You can see I've got an angle there. And then if I cut all the way through, which we'll see here in a minute if I did. Oop, not quite, hold on. Okay, so I've got my bevel here, right here along this edge, and then I've got one inside here on this piece. And now it's just a matter of scoring and slipping those two edges together. Okay. Any questions about what I just did while I'm scoring these two pieces up? I hear silence, so I'm going to take that as everyone's on the same page, everyone understands. All right, I don't have any slip handy, so I'm just going to put some water on there. and then score one more time over it to create that slip on the surface. Okay. And then I'm going to bring those two sides together. And give it good pressure all the way down. And this is another point at which your smooth metal rib will come in handy. So I'm going to take my rib, and once I have those two parts joined together, I'm just going to zip up the outside surface to make sure that I have a nice, tight, solid connection. Okay. You might have a little hiccup here at the top, which you can either kind of pinch together, smooth over, or you could even trim that off just from where that clay gets a little displaced. Okay, and then once this is set up some, then I can take this out, the paper and the can, I can take those out, and then I can use my modeling stick to clean up the seam on the inside and pull that together tightly. Okay, all right, so at this point I'm done building the wall of my mug. I will show you guys the floor of the mug tomorrow, but just to give you an idea of where we're headed, and this was an example I did for my other class this week, and I used the little bisque pieces to imprint into the surface. That was on the wall of the mug, then the floor was added, then the handle. Okay, so just again to give you a sense of where we're hoping to end up, and that's with whatever design technique that you're planning on using, whether it's the imprinting or the sgraffito or the slip work, slip transferring. Okay, you guys will end up with a mug similar in size to this. Okay, all right.